Today we're going to talk about Beyonce. And just in case you see me looking this way, it's because I do have notes this time. There's just a couple of notes on history because apparently some people are not very informed on their history. Now, it never fails. I start recording and some motorcycle goes by the street next to my house, so excuse the noise. Let's have a conversation about what happened this weekend, how crazy it was, and what does Beyonce have to do with anything. All right, so we all know the Super Bowl was this weekend, and a certain segment of the population had an issue because Taylor Swift this and Taylor Swift that, and it's a plot from the Democrats and blah, 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 blah. Nobody cares. Then Verizon had a commercial with Beyonce on it where she hinted at her new album coming out soon, and it's country music. And before I get into the whole country music thing, which is the purpose of this video, I just want to take a minute to make a comment about the fact that the Swifties were pissed, completely upset about the fact that Beyonce was trying to upstage Taylor Swift. First of all, Taylor Swift was watching her boyfriend play. She was not, this was not a concert she was doing for anybody. So she had nothing to do with anything. Number two, Beyonce does have an album coming out and she has every right to do whatever she wants in a commercial so long as Verizon approved of it. And third, why are you demonstrating that you just don't like certain groups of people because they don't look like Taylor? This isn't about a fact that, I hate, and I already made a video about this, I hate when women are pitted against women, but I absolutely hate the fandoms of Beyonce, Taylor Swift, and Nicki Minaj. They are unhinged and they don't understand, marketing. And Beyonce and Taylor didn't have an issue with each other, but you all made it about you and made fools of yourselves in the process. So now let's take it to the other side of the equation, which is, of course, because a certain segment of the population was so upset because Taylor Swift was going to be all over the Super Bowl. By the way, she would spend a total of 58 seconds on screen, just so you know. So no, that was not a thing, but whatever. Then you have the situation that ticked everybody off. And in the coming days, it has gone from a little rumble to a screaming match where you have people like Megyn Kelly, and she doesn't understand why there's so many black performers, and she's grateful to Usher because her children were not exposed to women's private parts from the likes of Shakira and J-Lo, and if you don't see the theme growing, then I can't help you. But then we had this segment from OAN. ON? I don't know how to say it. I don't care. I don't know the host. I don't know who she is. I don't care who she is. Because I thought it was very interesting that she's like, they're trying to take over country and all this other stuff. They. She never said who. She was talking about they. Of course, they were talking about the Beyonce album. So you know where she was going. And of course, why do I keep saying Ron Schneider? John Schneider, who used to be fairly popular in my time. He had a little show called The Dukes of Hazzard, which was popular in the 80s. Then he disappeared, and then he came back. Well, he didn't really disappear, but, he wasn't as hot as he was back then. And hot, I don't mean pretty, I mean like a commodity in Hollywood. Then he came back as a family member of Superman on a show that right this second I forgot the name of, but it's the show with Superman in it. I forgot the name. Anyway, bottom line is this. It was really funny to me that somebody asked on social media, I didn't know John Schneider was a singer. Yes, he is. He is. But that's not the point. Because I find it fascinating that these people don't know the history of their own country music. And there's another comment I'm going to make later I'm going to go back to that eventually. But the first thing I want you to understand is that Miss Beyonce was born in Houston, Texas. I do believe people from Texas have a little knowledge of what country music is. I'm just saying. As far as country music history, the first two blips for Americans tend to be the first two things that people usually mention is 1910, when the Southern Appalachian fiddle players, and no, I can't say Appalachian, so leave me alone. That was like the first bleep of something that sounded like country music. Now, you have to remember, the original country music style had a lot of fiddles in it, okay? In 1922, there was the first recording, and I have to look the name because I don't know how to say it. It's Eck Robertson. He was a fiddler. And that was the first time ever there was a recording made of somebody playing what would eventually become country music. But before that, way before that, in the 17th century to be exact, we had European and African immigrants who came to this country, who came to North America, so Canada is included on that one. And they introduced certain folk tales and certain folk songs. They had instruments that they introduced to the country. And by introduce, I mean one side to the other. And so this has been evolving since the 17th century. And notice that I mentioned African immigrants. I didn't call them what they were, because that's not the purpose of this video, but you know what they were. I'm just not going to mention it here. So then we have the influence. Now, you have to understand something. Black country music was a thing separate from white country music. It is what it is, okay? Black country music was started out from basically taking the hymns from the southern churches and turning them into something else, and from that it evolved into its own style, its own type of, it has its own soul, let's put it that way. And then there were two people that were instrumental in what I can only call a crossover, because they started influencing certain people. And the first one was Leslie Riddle, who influenced the Carter family. And the second one was Rufus Tita. What's Tita's last name? Payne. Rufus Payne, who was instrumental in Hank Williams' career. Now, the Carter family and Hank Williams, obviously white. Riddle and Payne were black. And that is when the crossover starts and the melting of those two styles of music, okay? But African Americans have always been a part of country music. So when I hear somebody who happens to be white, who happens to say they're trying to take over our music, I thought this was one country, and that's why you had an issue with the Black National Anthem, because we all are one country regardless of skin color. You can't have it both ways. That's one of the things that I find fascinating. Megyn Kelly was like, "Oh my God, there's only one country, and the national anthem should just be one, regardless. We all love each other regardless of skin color." That's her words, okay? But then you have this other person saying, "Oh, they're trying to take over country music." The host of ON. And I'm sitting here as a Puerto Rican, as a Boricua, who has lived through her own melting of European music with African music, with Taino music, and how, back in the day, like all the way up to the night, I'm going to say the 90s, because in the 2000s is when I started seeing this, and now it's very popular. When musicians would listen to all kinds of rhythms and incorporate it into their music, there was nothing wrong with it. Now it's been said, and I'm not going to sit here and say who's right and who's wrong, by the way. Now it's been said that the Europeans took the African music and ran with it. Now, we can have a very long conversation on whose side is right and whose side is wrong. I'm not going to comment on that because I was here in the 80s and the 90s when I would listen to people talking about how they came with their sound and how they went to different countries and incorporated different instruments and how much they loved the music for certain countries, and that's why they brought it to their albums. I also remember certain people complaining about they didn't want this and that and the other, but at the end of the day, here's the thing. Both sides have the same issue. You can't have it both ways. You can be happy that people are accepting your culture while at the same time complaining that they're taking over your culture. It's either one or the other. The bottom line is this. You have a woman, Beyonce, who's very popular as a pop singer, who is a very good singer. And she decided to make part 2 of her renaissance country music. And the people who are complaining about this, the number one complaint of especially this host from ON is that they're taking over. But what did you do when your ancestors came? What did your ancestors do when they came to this country? Because the last time I looked, your ancestors took over. And it's not just that. This is what I said. Nothing like descendants from the original colonizers getting mad that we are all waking up and taking over. Didn't have a problem with white artists taking over rap or borrowing from every style of music created, from reggae and salsa to jazz and the blues. Just admit you are racist. And of course, I said racist because you cannot use that word on Twix because you get, shadow ban or whatever you want to call it. I find that fascinating when I see people acting exactly like we were warned they would act. And by the way, I'm not saying all white people. And if anybody comes to my comment section and says, well, not all white people, get out. Because you are exactly the problem. Any person that takes this personally when they are they're not racing is exactly the problem. And if you don't, and by the way, most racists don't think they're racists. So it's really interesting to me that you would say something like, well, not all white people. Because the moment you say that, what you should do is take a step back and sit down with it and actually internalize what you're saying. You're defending a group of people, and then, of course, you attack the group of people calling out the bad behavior instead of analyzing whether you have some internalized issue that you need to deal with. And more importantly, instead of getting mad at the marginalized communities that are calling out the bad behavior, you should get mad at the white people who are doing the things that are making you look bad. But that's never what happens, is it? She made a record. She wants to publish her record. Let her publish her record. There's nothing wrong with any performer from any era, from any genre, crossovers happen all the time. And it's the most impressive thing that in Black History Month, a black woman would have to defend herself against the ignorance of certain white commentators who don't seem to understand the history of country music at all. And by the way, except for maybe John Schneider, do I think any of these other people know a damn thing about country music? No. But it is what it is. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.